Good morning. Welcome to Grace Baptist Church, Bloomingdale, Georgia. This is Sunday School, July 2nd, 2023, and we're going to do part 5 of this series on matters of origin, because we have agreed and concluded that our origins do matter. If any question on anything I've said, if I'm unclear, feel free to speak up. Just a quick recap of what we've done so far. The first session we had an overview and introduction, talked about why we study origins and how we study origins, God's threefold revelation. The second session we started in the book of Genesis, the beginning of beginnings, and we talked about the origin of matter itself, and God created all things out of nothing, and we learned that fancy term called ex nihilo. And we also talked about space, time, and matter and how they're related, and a little bit delve into the science aspects of it. Our third session we talked about creation of light and separation of water. Got into a little bit of the gap theory, discussed that, and last time we talked about the heaven, the firmament. Talked a little about the idea of a flat earth versus a globe, that we live in a three-dimensional world. Basic question about an expanding universe, and didn't give it a conclusive answer on that. By the way, Brother Richard, I looked up on the reference on fixed, and I couldn't see anything. The only thing that's referred to as fixed would be in the Bible that was using that word is our heart is fixed, my heart is fixed, the 3 times, and also there's a great goal fixed. There may be another word that we haven't thought about it, but I couldn't find anything on what we talked about heaven being fixed. We also started on day 3 last time, and that's what we'll pick up today. So let's read here day 3 of creation, like Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 1, and the third day starts on the verse 9. So let me just read verse 9 through 25. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the heaven in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, and saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the sea, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And we're going to stop right there, because after that we get into the creation of man, and I'm going to talk about that another time. So this is we're up to the 6th day here of creation. All right, real quick quiz here. Without looking down in the Bible, what we just read, what happened the first day? What did God do the first day? Just speak up. Is anybody?
He divided the firmament
Nope.
from the water.
No. The first day created light.
Oh, yeah, light.
The second day,
Divided the firmament.
divided the waters from the water, firmament in the midst of the waters. And we talked about, I mentioned the fact that there's a lot of water in the universe. I mean, a million times more than we have on Earth. But that's still within the heavens, the third heaven, or not the third, the second heaven, the outer space. But here, really look at it, it says divide the waters from the water to make the firmament the heavens. So that tells us there's a body of water, an expanse of water that we don't know anything of because we can't see it beyond that. But we talked about the fact that water is a fundamental substance. It's necessary for life, and it's all throughout the universe, and it has very specific properties that makes it important. Make sure that I keep time here, and also that this thing doesn't ring. Okay, and all right. So what happened day 3? Anybody? No, you can't look.
Dry land.
Hey.
Dry land.
Yeah. See, it's, I mean, we're all familiar with it, but it's interesting. I find myself, and I said, what was it? Was it that? Because we're so familiar with it, it's hard to forget the exact distinction of those days, because if we really don't study it, and like we pointed out last time, they don't go along the natural progression according to naturalists what would happen in the case of a Big Bang revolution. That's not the same sequence at all. So you can't parallel it, make it a symbolic representation of evolution. But the third day was the separation of earth and seas, and then plant life. And fourth day, anybody? The fourth day is the sun and the moon and the stars. Need some coffee. And the fifth day, the sea creatures and the fowls and the birds. The sea and air, but not on the land. Land creature was on the sixth day, which was the same day that man was created. The firmament, when it says on the day 3, the separation of earth and seas and plant life. Well, first of all, the separation of earth and seas is noteworthy because we sometimes refer to the earth as the globe, as the earth, and that's fine, that is a definition. But here, he called the dry land earth, and the water he called seas. And that's why it makes sense when the Bible talks about the 4 corners of the earth. How do you put corners on a globe? But he's talking about the continents, which once were one continent, and then they were separated, and nobody disagrees on that. So there was one, and we still have, east and west, north and south, in terms of our geography, earth geography.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
I can't remember what it was, but if it was all back together again, what would the land mass be, If it was all back together again?
Yeah. You mean how big was it being?
Yeah.
I have no idea. They called it
Somebody kind of postulated how big it would be.
It would be pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I'm not sure that the original continent was the sum of all the current parts, because they separated, and we see the evidence of that. The continents separated and then broke up the ocean, and there was a lot of magma coming out of the ocean and such. So there's they may have, and then there's the mountains, and this is all during the flood, and the waters, the deeps, deep was what it says, foundation of the deep, great deep was opened up, and so there was a lot of water coming from below, not only from above, and also there was a dividing of the land. There's a verse about that, but here we just had one continent here in the beginning, and then plant life, and then on the fourth day, the sun and the moon and the stars. And there was something I was going to say about that, but I forgot. Well, we'll come back to that. Well, day 5th, sea creatures and fowls. And all the time it says here, they were made after their kind. talking about the plants were made after their kind, and the animals were made after their kind. And that's noteworthy. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the chapter of resurrection, verse 39, it says, when we talk about the resurrection, it says, all flesh is not the same flesh. Here, he's using an analogy here. But there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, another of birds. And then he talks about the fact of that being an analogy of the fact of the difference between earthly body and heavenly bodies. There are celestial bodies and there are bodies terrestrial, and the glory of the celestial is one and the glory of the terrestrial is another. Just pointed out, he's using as the obvious fact that there's different types of flesh. And this what's described here in Genesis. God created different types of kinds there, and they procreated after their kind, and that's what we see in nature. We don't see the evolutionary idea of fishes becoming lizards and reptiles becoming birds. Birds becoming mammals or different. Those are just ideas. There's no backing or proof or evidence for that. And we see there's huge difficulties with that because there's so much so much different. It's more than the fact that some have 2 legs and some have 4 legs, and I know it's a whole different type of. We got different type of eyes, different type of breathing system. Different type of circulation, vascular, and they operate completely different. And you can't just transition from one to the other. One mutation, makes a little bit of towards that step, because then it won't work, it won't live, it won't survive. And there's nothing that'll preserve that by natural selection. If it doesn't work, it's not going to last. It's not going to procreate. It don't matter how many years you've got. But what we do see is what God says, God made after their kind. And we know in the Noah's Ark, God brought every kind of animal on the ark. And some people mock that, say, there's too many animals in the world. No, but you don't have to have all species on the world. But we're talking about kind, they're talking about groups of animals that actually can, some of them can interbreed, some of them cannot interbreed because they've been speciated so long. But for example, dogs, dog can look very different, right? But they can still interbreed. Right. And so they wouldn't have to be a Chihuahua and a Great Dane and all that. There was a dog on the ark, a wolf, and it wouldn't have to be a wolf too, because wolf and dogs are related as well. And the same thing with reptiles and others. There's after the kind, and we see that there's always made after their kind. Horses and zebras, they can interbreed. They're not fertile, the offspring of a mix of a horse and zebra, but they show that they are related.
So there's adaptation.
And then there's adaptation, yeah, and that's here. I just want to talk about here, verse 22. It says, and God blessed them and saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. You see that? That's very important, because that's also what we see when we see, and every part of nature, God has filled. We can go down to the bottom of the ocean floor, not on that, but to the what they call the trenches that are several miles down, when it's pitch black and the pressure is, in a way that you don't want to. We have just seen you don't want to send a submersible down there unless it's solid, because bad things will happen, because the environment is so extreme. But there's animals down there, yep. And they're just perfectly suited for that environment. In a way, we have to study carefully to figure out how they work. At Arctic, in Arctic area, where everything is frozen, there's microbiology there. There's all kind of little species and things and fishes, and that's where they thrive. That's where they want to be. And every part. And go to the jungle, with all these rainforest, where these trees are, whatever, they're huge. And then but every level's got a different ecosystem. There's some animals, they never see the ground. They spend all their life up, 50 feet in the air, and the trees, and that's where they live. And there's a different, there's a different type of light condition and humidity condition there. And then you got so with a limited amount of kinds, God filled the earth. He told them to multiply, and evolution says that what happened is whatever traits were beneficial when they got when things happened, mutation, things went wrong, but there happened to be a case where that defect was actually beneficial in a certain environment. So then they was able to find their niche. So they kind of by accident they kind of spread out. But the problem is that has never been proven. We've never seen a transitional form. We've never seen one.
Well, that's what I said. Somebody said, like birds, and the birds will nest in a house now, a structure that's not a tree. And they try to say that was evolution. No, that's adaptation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's one of the main examples that Darwin had was the finches on the Galapagos Island, because he pointed out that when they were, depending on what part of the island, what island, there were several islands there, and the wind conditions and the plants there, that the beak was longer or shorter depending on the food that was there. So say, well, then the beaks would happen to get longer. Then they had a better, where that was more suitable. Then they had better rate of survival. So then they procreated. So then all the finches there had their beak longer, and then so it kind of adapted to their environment. Well, the adaptation is true, but the fact that it was by random mutation, that's wrong. And then we find it now because now that we can study the genes more and actually doing targeted experiments. Another experiment is the fishes that live down there where there's no light, and they don't have any eyes. They don't need any eyes, and they have a different pigment also, pigmentation. And there's a research right now that's already starting to show that this is built-in mechanism that God put in for adapting. And God put that from the beginning. Well, these kinds, He had this so that they could fill the earth. And the reason how you can prove that, well, called reverse engineering. We see something, and engineers do that when a product that somebody else has made, and they figure out how it works. They do reverse engineering. They work backwards of the engineering process. But we can do that in the natural world, because God engineered it. We can look for purpose. We can look for mechanisms, for sensors, triggers, programming, and response based on changing condition. They call it continuous environmental tracking. It tracks what happens. It's to the point where they see that animals that have for example, things get I forgot what the species was, but it started getting cold, and then things started happening in their body where they prepare their offspring so they could better handle the cold. So even though they wouldn't, then there's already things, there were sensors and triggers that are built in that started preparing the offspring for the next generation for the changing environment. See, evolution, that's all ideas with these things about random mutation, and that's things people say. There's no research to support that. Nobody ever has shown that.
Because any mutations now are seen as a defect.
Right, and that's what they generally are. I mean, and everybody have to agree with that. There's defects are what they call the defects. They're injuries to the genome. Now there are some cases where a defect actually has a byproduct, a positive byproduct. For example, a famous example is sickle cell anemia. That happens to be and that's a genetic defect. There's a part of the gene that I don't know if it's changed something, but a product of that is that those people that have that, they're immune to malaria. They don't have to do well, great, but that's not a development and enhancement. It's like saying, well, I was born without legs. Well, hey, I don't have any legs. I'll never have smelly feet. I can never break my shin bones. Hey, evolution. No, it's not. It's just, well, there can be some benefits, and in the case of this gene, it's a little more elaborate. But the point is, there's the changes, the mutation. There's never more complexity. It's always a downgrade. It's always something cut off or injured, so you kind of deactivate something, and that may have an effect. But there's no building up of anything, because this statistically doesn't work, because it has to be preserved, and there's no natural process to preserve it. But the adaptation, though, that we were finding, the reason that they can find these is because it happens so fast. And evolution has to take a long time, but this adaptation we see in animals and species, it happens over just a couple of generations, 2-3 generations. And they're predictable based on an engineering model, so they can test it, and they can also study, chemically what is happening, what are the sensors, what are the triggers, because there's the machinery of the cells. And it blows evolution out of the water. You don't kind of read too much. I mean, it's available to see, but it's you don't see it on the news, because that's not interesting to people. They're trying to find the missing link between monkey and man, and they keep looking. But these changes are like they're rapid, they're predictable, they're repeatable. You can try it again and happen. The same thing happens. They try the same species in a different environment, the same thing happens. And how was the chance of the random mutation doing the same thing in different places? And it's reversible. It goes back, so they go back to the original environment. Then they adapt back to where they were. So that shows God had this built in. Multiply and fill the earth. Look at chapter 8, verse 17. Genesis chapter 8. Because here, what I read here in Genesis 1, verse 22, it says, God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply. Now, that's talking about sea creatures and birds. It doesn't talk about the land creatures. But in chapter 8, after Noah comes out of the ark, and his children and the animals, verse 16, chapter 8. Go forth of the ark, verse 15. And God spake unto Noah, saying, go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of creeping things that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. So, there it is. All right, another thing here, and since we're covering here, kind of finishing off the 6 days of creation, except for the creation of man. Next time we're going to go into look at creation of man, and also want to speak of the laws of nature. But for the time we have left here, there's 2 things I want to talk about as time allows. First of all, this day-age theory. The people have that. See the problems with that each of these days represent a time era, a long period of time.
Wait, you said the what theory?
They call it the day-age theory.
Day-age, A-G-E.
A-G-E, yeah. So they're saying that each day represents a whole age.
Okay.
That's the idea. I'm going to look here. I'm going to quote here from Schofield had a comment. Here it says, the word day is used in Scripture in 3 ways. 1, the part of a solar day of 24 hours, which is light. Number 2, such as a day set apart for a more distinctive purpose, saying as a day of atonement, or a day of, and then a day of judgment. And then also it is used in the Bible sometimes for a period of time, long or short, during which certain revealed purposes of God are to be accomplished, as the day of the Lord. That day of the Lord represents a time period. But it doesn't specifically how long that period is. Now, why do we say that why is the days here in the Genesis 1? Why do we say that that's a literal 24-hour period? And we talked about time. Right. That's the first part. It says morning and evening. That's kind of that's almost can be seen as going out of your way to make sure. Okay, this is morning, evening. It's a day. Now we know there was no sun and the moon the first 3 days, and we know that time is related to space, and there's and time moves differently, at different speeds and all that. But this is earth-centered. This is what happens on earth. So that's all that matters. How God sees. God is not bound by time, but this is for us. This is seeing what happens on the earth. So we see this is morning and evening. Secondly, the context. The book of Genesis, and as we continue it, this is an historical record. It talks about the creation of the world and the creation of animals and of man and woman. And then it talks about what happened with them, their children. It talks about historical record, and it goes right from there. There's no break where it goes from there, into the chronology and the genealogy of man. So it becomes a continuous historical record. It's not poetry. It's not symbolism. Well, no, we know there's parts in the Bible that are figurative, right? There's things that we don't take literally. Sometimes because the Bible says this represents so and so, like the prophecies of Daniel and in Revelation and such. But there's no such thing here. This is not a parable. This is the origin. God presents the origin to us. There's a number 3 of this, and this is people who study. I don't even know, brother, Pastor, what's the name of it when you study the literary and the origins, or that's no word for that. I don't know. Terms used when you do Bible study, when they do in the anyway.
It's a study of words.
Yeah, no, this is more like the study of text. Anyway, the literary style of this, the people who study Hebrew and I don't know if you talked about that when you went to seminary, about the different types of Hebrew writing, and in fact there's something called Hebrew poetry. You see something in Psalms, the way David is presented, it's got the duality of, he presents the same things but says it in two ways, but basically saying the same things. And there's other types of I'm no that's what I've been taught though and been read, that it's the Hebrew literature style here. It's not poetic, symbolic. This is the way that Hebrew writing is for chronology, and I think that just goes along with what you just said. But it's what it's in its context. That's what it obviously is. It would be very strange to go from something that's mythical into something that's historical. And fourth, God's wisdom and order of His revelation. The purpose of the Scripture is for us. God gave us His Word to reveal Himself, right? So, when you teach something, you start with the basic, the foundation, and then you get into more depth and into understanding, right? You start with the simple and build on it, and so that's what we learn from Scripture. The beginning is something that we can easily interpret, and God made it very clear so that we could interpret it. It doesn't matter if it fits modern, current mindset and current ideas, because ideas of mankind change over time. There was a time when people that believed in a globe got burned on the stake. Bible believers got burned on the stake, and people who believed the earth was round got burned on the stake because they thought that the earth was flat, and the Bible doesn't say that the earth is flat. So we don't have to worry about what majority. It's not a rule thing. Fifth, the order of creation. It's in conflict with evolution. And we talked about that. And that's if we assume that it's a natural development as described. And I say that because specifically regarding the creation of the moon and the sun. Look at verse, back to Genesis 1, verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. This is day 4. He has already created. He's already separated the land from the water, and He's created plant life. And we know, from high school biology, the fundamentals of plant life is sunlight, right? The sun gives light to the plants. That together with the water, the oxygen in the air. No, the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, it creates carbohydrates. That's the basic building stone of energy. But we all have energy, whether a plant or animal. We all have to have those carbohydrates. That's how we get energy, and that's what we capture the energy of the sun. Without the sun, there's no such thing. There is no plant life without light. So, according to evolution, then we had or not evolution, rather, Big Bang that ties in with evolution. And by the way, Richard, I listened to that thing that you sent. That was very interesting. Challenges to the Big Bang. But anyway, according to Big Bang, we have the Big Bang, and then the everything is spinning, and then you have the formation of solar systems and planets starting orbit around stars and then our sun. And then, being those conditions, then we have water, and then we have little cells that somehow pop into life and becomes, create themselves. The idea. So, and then and then plant life evolves. So you have to have that system has to be in place. So in order for it to hear that in this sequence here, if this each day is 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, you have a million years without sun. Now you have light according to Scripture, but you don't have that light in evolution. What was the light come from? God provided that first light. So the sequence is off. It doesn't work. And it's also, I think I pointed out, it's very interesting. If I was, if I would set the sequence of the earth, just even without terms of evolution, it wouldn't make sense to me. But this is because I don't have God's wisdom and understanding. I said, well, all right, so we separated created the firmament, the earth, the firmament. Okay, then we put the lights in place, got everything in place. Okay, now we put the plants in there, the animals, and all that, and they build up, and then to man. Or you can put everything in place, and then put the plants and animals and everything, and then put the lights in there at the final cap. But the interesting thing here is that the sun and the moon is right in the middle of it. Plant life, and then the sun and moon, and then the animals. Why is that? I have no idea. That's God's wisdom. That's the way God made it. But I know one thing: the fact that I think is important that the sun and the moon and the stars were not created before plant life, because that shows that they are not to be worshipped. God put them in place. He delegated His authority to rule the day and night. He ruled that before that, just like God ruled Israel, and then they got kings and judges and kings and things. God put things in place. Talked about the tabernacle, the same thing there. The tabernacle became the anchor of the presence of God for the children of Israel. Before that, before the tabernacles, the pillar was moving, the wall or the pillar of fire by night and pillar of cloud by day. It moved, and they followed that. After that, it just lifted and it rose and descended on that tabernacle. The tabernacle moved, then the people moved. So it was a principle there, but it pointed out God made that, I believe, so that man worship the sun and the moon, but man has still worshipped the sun and moon. That's the sun god is in many religions important. That's our life giver, oh thou life giver, because we get heat and we get everything else, but that's man and his depravity. All right, we're just about out of time. And speaking of time, that was the last thing I was going to talk about. When was all this made? And it doesn't take long. I can just mention it. Because that's, according to the Big Bang, there was 14 billion years ago. And that's a little bit different than what the Bible shows us. That's something that you stand up for that. What the Bible says, a lot of people are going to ridicule and mock you. I believe the earth and the universe is about 6,000 years old. And why do I believe that? Why do we believe that? Because God shows 6 days of creation, and on the 6th day He created Adam. And from Adam, we have a genealogy that goes all the way to Jesus Christ. And not only saying that he was the son of so and he was the son of so, which some of the genealogies is, but if you look at chapter 5, and God made this, God made sure this was in there so there wouldn't be any doubt. Famous bishop, I don't know how many years ago, but Bishop Usher, I don't know if it was Catholic or Protestant, what, but he made it. He was the one that kind of publicized this chronology, just kind of formalized it so it became an easy reference for everybody. He kind of calculated what the age of the earth was. But in chapter 5, verse from Adam and Eve. And only all these verses, look at, for example, verse 6, and Seth lived 105 years and begat Enos. And Seth lived after he begat Enos 108 and 807 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years and begat sons and daughters. You see that? So then it's important that you know how old they were when they had their child, so that we can calculate a continuous time scale or time a time schedule, or timeline. That's what I'm trying to say. And then, so that goes all the way to. That goes to Noah. Okay, that's the last part. Verse 32 says Noah, but then go to chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11, verse 10. And these are the generation of Shem. Who was Shem? He's the son of Noah. And Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Okay, so now we're picking up where we left off in chapter 5. So Arphaxad was 2 years old. So Shem was 100 years old and he begat Arphaxad. And then after that he lived 500 years and then Arphaxad, his son, lived 530 years, and then he had a son. So that continues that chronology and timeline and genealogy. And he goes all the way on to 6. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And from Abram, we know we have a timeline there, because we got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then we have the generation of Jacob to David, and from King David to Jesus Christ. And in fact, in Abraham, that's already settled in history. We know that. That's about 2000 BC. So then we're already into current time counting. So that's and I actually I counted it because Shem, he was son of Noah. He was really old. He lived 500 years, and then of course I believe it's because of the deterioration of the human genes and the fact that we're deteriorating after the fall, so we don't have the same genetic setup, and there was actually quite a distinct difference between the ages of that generation. After that is suddenly started a lot shorter. Abraham only became 120 years old. But I counted these ages. How old would we be for each subsequent generation? And I figured out that Shem, the son of Noah, was actually alive when Abraham was born. And I wonder if he outlived Abraham. I don't remember that for sure, but I know that he was born. So for all these generations, he was born because he was so old. So I just thought that was interesting. All right, we'll have to close there. Next time I want to talk about one time we'll take up another thing about concerning time, because this is what the Bible says. Now, next time we'll begin with looking at what the Big Bang says, or other cosmologies, and the problem of light, the speed of light, and time, because people say, well, because we see light that's come to us from different galaxies that would take millions of years to get here. But I'm going to show some very interesting things about why that's not necessarily so. And there's a lot of people that don't believe the Bible that say the same thing. It's not as well established as we think. We have made models on it, and we can measure distance, but the fact of time in that's not really that sure. So I want to talk about also the laws of nature, if time allows. So, all right, thanks for your attention, and we'll take a break.